Good morning, everyone. I'm Asha Nayaswami. We're continuing with our review of renunciation for the New Age, a new renunciate order for the New Age. And today we're on our vow of complete renunciation, which is, you might anticipate, the final chapter of the story. So let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints, saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to all. Help us to understand, on ever deeper levels of our being, who we are in the eyes of God, and how we can live in this world in fulfillment of that divine destiny. We are your children. Guide us and bless us. Om. Peace. Amen. All right, my friends. This whole subject of renunciation is such an important one for the spiritual path. And it isn't popular right now. Nobody's much into giving up anything these days. The whole, if I can misuse the word bhav means spiritual mood. So the whole bhav of our culture right now is self-indulgence in what we can get. It's just not popular to think in terms of self-sacrifice. But the great secret of the spiritual path is the more we indulge our whims and fancies, as Lahiri Mahashaya calls it, the more entrapped we are. And that our only freedom is in strengthening our connection to our higher selves and attaining freedom from the compelling cross currents of ego self-indulgence. So, as one of the listeners to this program said to me when we started this, the bar at Ananda is already pretty high. And yeah, it is. But the bar is equal to the fulfillment that comes. And as I've said several times reading this through, and in every other program that I've done, you have to want it. And you have to want it not out of fear or out of a desire to look good or this is how I ought to feel. It has to be the authentic longing of your spirit. And if it isn't, you should be sincere and be authentic and be yourself and just keep God with you. And he'll help you when you're in kindergarten or when you're in high school or when you're in undergraduate study. You have to behave appropriately for whatever it is that you're learning. And then after you learn that, then you can build on it and go to something else. But if you try to skip to a higher level just because you think it's going to make you look good, you won't be any good at it anyway. But if we just steadily, step by step, go through every stage, and as I've said several times, and it's very important, we have to have the self-confidence and the trust in God to just be what we are and be happy being that. And in that way, then, we actually progress much faster than if we try to push ourselves beyond what's natural to us. So now we are at the vow of complete renunciation, which is what we call the Nayaswami vow, which those of us who are dressed in this blue color, those of you who come to Ananda see this, those of you who come to Ananda and those of you who are neighbors of Ananda, a community in Palo Alto, where they just see these random people walking in blue all the time, and will eventually say, why are you all wearing blue? When one is by oneself, it's not so noticeable, but when you go out in a crowd, when somebody comes and you're sitting in a restaurant and there's 6 of you and you're all dressed in blue, people are inclined to ask. Usually, my answer is simple. I usually say, I belong to a yoga ashram and I've taken a certain initiation, and wearing this color is part of it. It's surprising to me how few people ask a second question. I'm more than willing to answer a second question, but I rarely get it. Sometimes we give humorous answers. We were in a breakfast place once on a trip with about 6 of us, and when she asked us, the waitress, there had just been some big baseball game, and apparently the Dodgers wear this color. So one of the men just said that we were Dodgers fans. It wasn't exactly a lie. I mean, well, it was a lie. It was misleading, let's put it that way. We're Dodgers fans, which seemed to make perfect sense to the waitress, so we just went on from there. I think it made a lot more sense than to have said that we have taken a yoga initiation. Okay, vow of complete renunciation. Now, there's nothing equivocal here. This is not, I understand and strive to accept. There's nothing equivocal. This is a completely different vow. From now on, I embrace as the only purpose of my life the search for God. We're beyond understanding and accepting. We simply embrace it. Swami's words are so beautiful. Embrace has such a sweet connotation. Swami has said if you have something that you're going to repeat often, the poetry of it and the actual vibrations of the words really help it penetrate into the subconscious. From now on, I embrace as the only purpose of my life the search for God. It's just unequivocal. There it is. I have no other priorities. This is simply who I am and what I do. And when you can say that, and you realize not that one has no other desires, because you have to bear in mind, if you take a vow, it's because it's what you're growing into. I often comment, you don't have to take a vow. I will not murder. I will not steal. I will not defraud my friends, because you don't have to vow not to do it. I don't have to vow not to do it. I think most people don't. Most people listening to this, because there's simply no inclination. It's behind you, way behind you. So you take a vow that is just a little bigger than you are. But just like affirmations, it's the right size stretch. It's close, it's bigger than I am, but close enough to what I am that no part of me rebels. If the vow or the affirmation is too much bigger than you, your subconscious mind will challenge it every time you say it. From now on, I embrace as the only purpose of my life the search for God. Yeah, what about this that you want? What about the boat? What about the mansion? What about the woman? What about the money? And so there has to be a realization that, well, I'm going to have to strengthen myself to resist other impulses I may have, but I can and I will. And your subconscious is committed to the same goal that your superconscious is committed to. You're beginning to unify the aspects of yourself. And I was yesterday when we were talking about the Tyaga vow, which is the married novices, there were several important parts of the vow relating to elevating and refining and aligning that partnership with the vow. And I'd mentioned that in the complete vow of renunciation, it's dealt with much more quickly. The first line of the second is, I will never take a partner. Now, when I look at this, this is a vow going forward, even beyond this incarnation. Not that the vow will necessarily carry forward, but I embrace as the only purpose of my life the search for God. I will never take a partner. I want to be free to do only this. Or, and that's exactly what it says, or if I am married, I will look upon my partner as belonging only to thee, Lord. So there's no sense of personal relationship here. There's a partnership given to us by God. My partner belongs to God. We're walking this path together, but there's no ownership. There's no ego to own here, and there's no affirmation of this is my wife, this is my husband. It's that the two of us are renunciates together. What I'm trying to say is there's no compromise here. There's no piece of this where I still get to have that. Partnership is a beautiful aspect of the spiritual path, especially if you've grown together into this. We can really help each other as true divine friends. But I will look upon my partner as belonging only to thee, Lord. In any case, whether single or married, and this is the relevant point, I am complete in myself, and in myself will merge all the opposites of duality. In other words, I'm not dependent on my partner to complete me. And the reason, especially male and female, are drawn together is because they have complementary energies, and in that union, those energies are exchanged until each becomes whole within himself or within herself. That is the point. That's the cosmic reason why the complementary genders are drawn to each other, is because then they become whole. So in any case, but the wholeness belongs to the individual. It's not dependent anymore on the partnership. So in any case, whether married or single, I am complete in myself. This is not a dependent relationship. This is not a compelled relationship. I'm in this relationship because it's what God has given me, but I'm not compelled. I am complete in myself, and within myself will merge all the opposites of duality. So what we have described here is the fulfillment of the marriage relationship, that I am complete in myself, and within myself will merge all the opposites. And my partner is here, but my partner belongs only to God. Or I'm done with it. It's just not necessary for me to have that kind of human intimacy. That doesn't mean I don't have deep friendships. It just means that that particular unique need, which compels all of humanity, I'm complete in myself now. Then it says, I no longer exist as a separate entity, but offer my life unreservedly into thy great ocean of awareness. Oh my, I no longer exist as a separate entity. This is not a small ambition. We actually had a lot of fun with this when we were in CC in November in 2009, when Swami did this first initiation. And I think there were 11 or 12 of us who had come from different parts of the world. Mostly, we were all Americans, actually. Some from India, some from America, had come together in Assisi to be part of this. We had rented this big van, and we were just going around there together. And we were talking about the fact that, many species, when they come together, they have a special name, like you have a pod of whales or a pod of dolphins, or you have a flock of geese. There's specific words. There's other words that I don't remember where there's a specific. So we said, what do you have when you have a group of Nayaswamis together? So we decided what you have is a void. Because if each of us no longer exists as a separate entity, then what you have is you have nothing at all. So humor always helps. I no longer exist as a separate entity, but offer myself unreservedly into that great ocean of awareness. It's a very subtle spiritual point, because individual consciousness still exists. It's not like our consciousness is extinguished, or even our individuality is not extinguished, or at least it can be. It always floats. The bubble, even though the bubble merges into the ocean, the bubble is still there, or the bubble can be lifted out if necessary for incarnation, or to respond to devotees. That's why you can continue to pray to Jesus, and Jesus, who is one with the infinite, will still appear to you as Jesus. The bubble can manifest itself as a part of the ocean, but still discernible as a bubble. I no longer exist as a separate entity, but offer myself unreservedly into thy great ocean of awareness. So we move guided by God, but we move as part of the whole. And this is just an exquisite way to just talk about overcoming the ego. And whenever the thought arises that there's personal need, that I have to be treated a certain way, that why are people acting this way toward me? But there's no me for them to act toward. It may appear as if they are. I am now an event for which I am responsible, as Swami Kriyananda said. I no longer exist as a separate entity. I mean, it's very hard for the mind to get around it. But there's a point at which the intuition just begins to understand that. One simply forgets oneself. And this is a very important part of understanding spiritual life. You don't become perfect. you just become unimportant. The way Swami put it when he was urging us to dynamically accept the responsibility of being channels for God. He said, don't put yourself down. Don't say, oh, I'm nothing, I'm not worthy. He said, just put yourself aside. Just you are not the point. When I first moved to Ananda Village, my first summer, 1971, and by the end of the summer, I'd become responsible. And by August, I was solely responsible for the running of the kitchen, 3 meals a day, 6 days a week. And I was serving not only the guests, but about 30 people, community residents also lived there, none of whom had their own kitchens. And so I just had to feed everybody. And I had very little help. And the little help I had wasn't very competent. So I had to make sure 3 meals a day were put on the table. And on the 7th day, I went to town and did everybody's laundry, 30 loads of laundry in the laundromat, and bought all the groceries for the week. So there wasn't a lot of spare time. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And what happened was, for the first time in my life, I more or less ceased to exist. I was just the flow of energy. And I was conscious of the fact that the great happiness I felt was because I had just put myself aside. I just didn't have time to think about myself. All I could think about was serving others. This is the great freedom that comes from karma yoga, true karma yoga. I mean, and there was very little in it for me except meals. The rest of it was just the joy, the absolute joy of doing all that for everyone else. I no longer exist as a separate entity. It was a very early and extremely important glimpse of the freedom of what spiritual freedom really is when we're just moving in the whole. So now we make this as a vow. I no longer exist as a separate entity, but offer myself unreservedly into thy great ocean of awareness, even if one is not even close to feeling comfortable taking this vow for oneself. The lines are beautiful affirmations just to meditate on. I remember once thinking, it was like a split-second experience, but it was real enough that I still remember. I was thinking about what it would be like to be absolutely unafraid of anything, which of course would be the state of mind of a great saint or a master. What in this world could touch him? And I was just thinking about it, and I was actually walking up the stairs of the house I was living in. And as I was walking up the stairs for just a moment, I sort of was like lifted into that state. And being a human being, and being a human being who has had a karmic pattern of being a little anxious, which thank God is not nearly so prevalent, I was conscious of the fact that I was always vibrating with a little bit of anxiety, or a lot of anxiety, depending on the day. And suddenly it was all gone. Just extraordinary. How much energy is completely, continuously drained from consciousness by subconscious fears, self-concerns, desires, on and on. Just for a moment, it was all gone. Because I guess I'd prayed to feel that, and then of course it all rushed back. But I haven't forgotten. So if it's possible, even for a split second, it's possible. It's possible for this unit of consciousness to experience it. I no longer exist as a separate entity, but just swim in the great ocean of awareness. I accept nothing as mine. No one is mine, no talent, no success, no achievement as my own, but everything is thine alone. This is just making concrete. What does it mean if I no longer exist as a separate entity? Who is there to own anything? I did this, I did that, this is my success. And even if we don't articulate it, there's that feeling that kind of vibrates around us of what I've done and who I am and how people think of me or don't think of me, and just all the things that I've managed to do. Somebody asked me of what I've done in life, how much was my doing and how much was they asked me how much was because of Swamiji. All of it was because of Swamiji. What kind of a question is that? But then I had to stop and think for a moment. And my answer was, well, I persevered. I didn't quit. No matter how many obstacles, no matter how many bad days, no matter how many times I just flopped on my face and had to lie in the mud until I could get my strength together to get back up again, I persevered. So my part was to persevere. But the paradox of it is, you see, whatever we're able to actually accomplish happens through the part of us that isn't there anymore. And when you begin to act in devotion to God, in service to God, that becomes very obvious to you. And people will still say, well, God had to have an instrument. And it's just like people are so determined, to put ego on you. You're so determined to get rid of it, and they're so determined to put it on you. No, if it hadn't been me, he would have found another. But when the energy really flows, it's not humility to say I didn't do it. It's just a fact. You just can't claim it because it's not yours. It's just where you don't exist. I realize that very interestingly. Where people praise you, what people praise you for, is the part that you didn't do. And it's as simple as that. And once you begin to feel that at all, and see, that's why this vow has to be experienced. You have to have enough experience that when you can say that, it's not just a ridiculous idea. It may not be as total, and it may not be as integrated and as consistent as the vow, but you have to have stepped into it enough in your life that you know it's where you're going. I accept nothing as mine. No one is mine. No talent, no success, no achievement is my own, but everything is thine alone. And see, this is what true renunciation is: to give away your money, to give away your house, to not marry. It doesn't mean anything, because if you're clinging to it all inside, you're just as bound as if you were owning everything in the world. What binds us is our self-definition. What binds us is the need to cling to egoic self-definition to feel that we exist or that we're worthwhile. What frees us is to know that we don't need it. So this vow doesn't say anything about the details of life. It says, be this way inside. Everything else will follow. Then you can live in a palace, but you don't own it. I accept nothing is mine. No one is mine. It just doesn't matter. I will feel that not only the fruit of my labor, but the labor itself is only thine. Act through me always, Lord, to accomplish thy design. So we move it even a step. It's not merely nishkam karma. Nishkam karma is to act without attachment to the fruits of our labor. So he's taking it a step beyond nishkam karma. It's not merely that I will act, but then I will give you, Lord, the results. It's that even the energy that passes through me is not my energy. This is complete ego transcendence. And once again, you have to really have some experience of this. You have to have actually entered deep enough into the divine flow. And don't think that this is so like esoteric or so beyond the pale. Anyone who is devoted to being an instrument of God has these moments where you just know it's not you. The creative arts are a wonderful place to experience it, which is why Swamiji encourages us so much in that way. This book, Light Bearer, that I wrote, it was such a huge enterprise in my life. When I finally wrote it, I didn't write it. And so all my years of learning to write and learning not to be critical and learning to be creative and learning to persevere and all the things I learned was just learning to move aside so that Swami could tell me what he wanted in that book and I could type it. And I spent months and months of hours of dedicated work. But the dedicated work was to let go of all the self-concern that had blocked my ability to let it be divine energy. And then when it flows through you, you just say it so casually because it's not ego that's saying it. It's by very definition, it's not your ego self that's saying, I was a channel. Because if there's an ego self saying that I was the channel, then you can't say it because it doesn't happen. That's why Swami could just talk about all the things he accomplished. And people who didn't know him well thought he was being egoic. It was exactly the opposite. He was just saying, look what can happen There was no self to claim it, because I will feel that not only the fruit of my labor, but the labor itself is only thine. And then comes the prayer, act through me always, Lord, to accomplish thy design. To make these affirmations, this vow true. But when we commit ourselves to this, we have given up the false pleasure of elevating the ego by our own actions. We've just repudiated it. It's not pleasant to me anymore. And even if I fall into it, as soon as I see it, it's anathema to me. I really don't want that. This is not who I am. And we pull ourselves back. And as a consequence of that vow, I am free in thy joy and will rejoice forever in thy blissful presence. And here Swami is telling us, this is what complete renunciation is. This is not some dour sense of suffering and loss and clinging to it for the sake of what God will give me in the end. Not at all. I am free in thy joy and will rejoice forever in thy blissful presence. And this is perhaps the most important line in the whole vow, because this is what it means. The vow of complete renunciation is to rejoice forever in thy blissful presence. And again, you don't step into this until that's self-evident to you. If any part of this feels like loss, then you need to hold back until you're ready. Now, let me modify that. It's a balance, because sometimes we do have to mourn because we were attached. But the balance is always, I know what I'm doing and I know why I'm doing it. And even if I have to go through some discipline to get there, I know what I'm doing. This is not suppression and I don't feel oppressed. I have taken this on because I want to be free in thy joy and rejoice forever in thy blissful presence. In Swami's Moksha Mandir, the place where his body is buried, celebrating his spiritual freedom, these are the words of Swami that are on the wall. I am free in thy joy and will rejoice forever in thy blissful presence. Absolutely perfect. Then the prayer, help me, speaking to God, help me in my efforts to achieve perfection in this my holy vow. It says merely that I become, in the previous vows it says that I become ever more perfect. This simply states, help me that I achieve perfection. This is the complete vow. We're not stopping. Now, we're not going to get more perfect. We are going to achieve perfection in this, my holy vow. For I have no goal in life but to know thee. And then Swami adds, and to serve as a channel of thy blessing to all mankind. So these last two parts really tell us everything about what the vow is. This vow is about rejoicing in bliss. This vow is about not giving up. This is it. I've stepped on this path, and I realize when I go back to the second thing, I will never take a partner. That's what he says first. Or if I am married, I will feel that my partner belongs to thee. But this is a vow. Once you step onto a vow like this, we're looking beyond the possibility of this lifetime. This is the force now. I've come to this point, and this is the force. I am complete in myself. And whether I marry, whether I don't marry, whether I reincarnate or I don't reincarnate, help me to achieve perfection in this my holy vow. For I have no goal in life, I have no goal in life. The only purpose of my life is to search for God. I have no goal in life but to know thee. And to serve as a channel of blessing to all mankind. And that's what it is to be a renunciate in the new age. A glorious destiny that is there in front of all of us, not to be feared, but to be gloriously anticipated. and to be celebrated, whether we have stepped, onto this spot in divine awareness, or whether we simply see it shining in front of us. I will rejoice. I am free in thy joy, and will rejoice forever in thy blissful presence. May these words become the truth of our being. And soon. God bless you.